Thank you for joining our program, Think, Build, Launch. I want to thank our sponsors, Marl Startup Studio, and I am your host, Jennifer Sertl, the Community Director of Marl Startup Studio, and we are here in Rochester at Rock Vox Recording and Production Studio. We have a great weave on our program of people new to entrepreneurship and those who have already built and launched successful companies. Stories are how we learn from one another. Stories are where we find strength when we're exhausted, and stories are where we find our inspiration. Today's guest is Michael Thaney. Michael leads innovation partnerships for Constellation Brands' emerging technology and enterprise architecture team, and he helps prove the value of new technologies and ways of working within the innovation ecosystem, which includes technology platform companies, startups, universities, and VC firms. Michael has expertise in high-growth software companies, and particularly Highland Software. With over a decade of consulting experience with Accenture Digital, he's been able to help develop digital strategies and implement digital solutions for companies large and small. Michael's passionate about bringing resources to the Rochester startup community, and in fact, he started Rochester's Start Up Grind chapter in 2020. Michael volunteers as a mentor for Alchemist Accelerator, Rochester's Institute of Technology, Tech's Startup Weekend, Mass Challenge, and he's also working with us at Marl Startup Studio as a judge in our pitch competitions. Thank you for joining us, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jennifer. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to today's session.
One of the reasons that I think is exciting is that you're one of the people, if we think of 800,000 students here in Rochester, and we really want all of these students to stay in our community. And you have quite an interesting story because you went away and chose to come back. Can you talk to us about your choices?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, it's pretty cool being back home and running into other people that have similar journeys or aren't from Rochester and have come back. But I guess my story started with born and raised here, west side of Rochester. I grew up in Chile. And left for school. I went to Case Western to pursue a computer engineering degree. And from there, I was looking around for opportunities and basically stuck on with a local software company out in Cleveland, their high growth company, Highland Software. They grew up basically when the .com was, when the bubble was bursting, but they're legitimate software company, enterprise content management. So had a lot of experience right off the bat, kind of a high growth software company. And then from there, looked for more opportunities, was growing my career, and moved up to Chicago, took a role with Accenture, that company, large consulting firm, and they were just expanding kind of in the area that, that I had my skill set in. So I moved further away from home, always with the eye and trying to get back home, always looking for, opportunity to do that. So got to meet a lot of great people, got to travel a lot, but it really wasn't until, late 2018, where an opportunity, opened up back home in Rochester. Constellation Brands, alcohol manufacturer, was creating an emerging technology team out of their IT organization. So very similar to the work I was doing in innovation at that time. So was able to move back home, and I feel like that was kind of like a unicorn situation or catching lightning in a bottle. So I'm very grateful for that. But moving back home, and then also, at the time I was at Accenture, got to work with their ventures group quite a bit. They're all, Silicon Valley based, but they did have the opportunities to engage in like local ecosystems. So myself and a few folks that were, just passionate about like emerging tech and new things in that space, were able to start attending like local startup events in Chicago. We spent a lot of time at 1871, got to engage with a lot of like founders out there. So we actually created a little program at Accenture. So we could, as clients are coming into the office down there, we could have, as part of the innovation days there, we could kind of like match them up with startups. So anytime, a CMO, somebody in the C-suite was interested in like, how to think like a startup, act like a startup. We kind of had this little pool of folks, and we actually worked with the founder of Cameo. And they raised a lot of money, had a lot of success. So it was really cool to see them when they were like a 4-person company. But that really got me excited about seeing what the potential was for, the startup and the tech scene. So when I came back home, knowing that there was, coming out of college and having, a certain technical skill set, there just wasn't a lot of opportunity at the time in Rochester. And I grew up in the era of, Kodak and Xerox being what they were. So I really saw that as an opportunity, as looking forward to kind of like the next generation. how could we do things here in Rochester that would really impact, the community here, but also give opportunities for people, my age and younger, especially like folks that, are in the education system right now, folks that are coming to Rochester from other cities, right, for the caliber of the education. So really leaned into like the startup community here. And that's where I, one of my steps was, as I was getting acclimated to the world back home, was connecting with some, folks in Rochester. And then it was actually a recommendation at a Techstars weekend in Buffalo. One of the mentors I met there was actually a boomerang he was in Colorado for a while. And he's like, there's this group called Start Up Grind. There's not a chapter in Rochester. They do fireside chats. Now we even do like pitch battles. But it is like a globally connected group. Again, it's really meant to just kind of pull, the community together. And with that, we have resources, to connect folks with, the founders and the creators out in Silicon Valley. So that was really my like foray, into getting, something going in Rochester that, I was contributing to. As that process went along, got to meet a lot of great people, got to meet a lot of great partners. So kind of where we're looking at today is I feel like that was Startup Grind was one of the catalysts to help at least my journey to kind of crystallize that like there is value here. And then just the time I've been at home, seeing some of those connections. So my co-director, Velzar, we had our first fireside chat with at the time the company was called Jorsec. It's now Horeto.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And they've gone on to raise a couple of rounds, but our first speaker, right, was Patrick Bosek, and ended up hiring Velzar, my co-director, and then one of our other volunteers for Startup Grind ended up becoming an employee there too. So, the tangible impact of, Startup Grind itself isn't, creating the companies or, accelerating them like Marl Studio does, but making those connections and seeing how that can kind of help was like that first kind of moment where I was like, oh, there is something here, and we gotta keep, pushing forward on it.
One of the reasons why I wanted you to be one of the first guests on our program is that you have been like an eagle. You've been to so many startup pitch competitions, and you've been able to see what really works and what really doesn't. And we have every Thursday, we have a pitch competition online. And so I'd love to glean, what are two things that when these students that don't have a lot of business acumen do their pitches, are there a couple of ideas that you've learned that would really make a difference for them?
Oh, as far as they're actually pitching?
Yeah. Or any way, like you've seen, I guess what I'm trying to lean into is that you've been doing business model prototyping for over 10 years, and you've seen probably over 600 business models. And I'm just wanting to learn as much as I can from you about that.
Yep. I would say from my experience, I'm trying to think of any sort of like lesson learned failure story, but I guess I remember a lot of the highlights. So I would say what resonates well, and have also had the honor of being a judge on a couple of those. So I would say two things that if I'm going to give two tips that stand out for like I guess well-crafted pitches. When you're that early stage, I wouldn't worry too much about like the addressable market, market size, but really understanding and showing that you like know the problem is one of those things. So, when you're crafting your pitch, like who are you solving for? What is their problem? And then I would say where students just don't have that much like industry experience, and pick your industry, and they're very ambitious and they'll go try to attack the world's biggest problems. So somebody who's been 5-10 years in industry might have actually experienced that problem themselves. But I guess the other tip where this plays in is like the way you can know your customer, know the problem without having experience yourself or having loads of industry experience is talking to customers. And I think that's like very easy to identify when judges start asking questions, right? Has not so much have you done your homework, right? But like the students that get out there, talk to people, have those conversations, always looking to meet the next person, always following up with people, like the persistence and the tenacity that, shows in being able to talk about that problem. Because, can't speak for Marl exclusively, but I've heard multiple, VCs and accelerator startup students, when you're looking at the founder, it's like, whatever the solution is, that's going to change. Even if you nail it, right, you're still going to evolve and stay ahead of your competition. So knowing that you have founders that are just like tenacious about like digging into the problem and like, being able to be flexible and experiment, like those are things that like those are hard to come across in a 5-10 minute pitch, but be able to say, when I talk to so-and-so, or kind of be able to like say after talking to 100 people, 80% of them said this, like those are things that are kind of hard to refute, right, when you're in a pitch competition. So the more of those examples you can bring in, or that type of dialogue you can use, really, really kind of stands out. And then the other part of that, right, is again, that persistence is something that I think, at least in the competitions I've been in, like people are looking at to invest because somebody's, a dog who's got a bone is not going to like let it go. Those are usually the types of founders that, VCs will back. The serial founders, they want to back more than once. So those are kind of my quick tips is, kind of know your problem, but the best way to show that is, having that evidence that you've talked to people.
Thank you very much. I like the idea that to be open to iterating and that talking to customers is probably the most important research. And I think that's a great point. Another thing I'm thinking as I'm sitting across from you is that you've just been an incredible networker and have an incredible network. Many of our students are new to that process. Are there any ideas or tips that you can think of to help, young people, I'm saying 19 to 23-year-olds, really begin to be really good at networking and building strong relationships?
Yeah, there's one specific to here in Rochester. I'm also part of the Rochester Open Coffee Club. So Josh Kreger kind of spearheads that. So one of the easy ways to network, A, show up to that event. B, this event starts at 7:30 on Wednesday mornings and goes till 9. So you don't have to be there at 7:30, but showing up, right? Like participating, you don't need all the answers and you don't have to meet everyone in one night. I guess I feel like sometimes I could be a extroverted introvert. So kind of going out the goal of like, I'll just talk to the person next to me, or I'll, find the other person sitting by the punch bowl, and, offer to, grab them a drink. So in the networking sense, I think, showing up is a big part when you're that young, and it's intimidating, but again, don't feel like you have to like meet everyone, or you don't have to like become best friends with the facilitator of whatever the event is, but, try to participate, show up. And then the other aspect that I would say that kind of has resonated as I've gotten more acclimated to the startup community, I feel like a lot of us have this inherently, but we did a book club and we read, it was a Startup Community Way. It was a Brad Fell and Ian Hathaway book, so founders of Techstars. And one of the themes there that resonates to everything Techstars does is like a give first mentality. So everyone has, in that sense of like, if you feel like you're a little new, junior, you don't have much of a network, everyone has something to contribute. So even in those open coffee clubs, they did them in Buffalo too, people will kind of give up and have a give and then have an ask. So, there's always something that other people don't know. So in that give first mentality, I'm just making some generalizations on people of that demographic. But if somebody could show me how to like promote Startup Grind in a TikTok video, I would love that because I'm in my 40s now and don't grasp technology as quick. So again, when you think of like, I don't know what I have to offer, there are some very basic things. So just getting to know somebody and talking to them, you always have a way you can kind of contribute. There was literally somebody who like offered like how to like certain hotkeys right on a MacBook. That now have saved me from having to look that stuff up every time I want to take a screenshot or copy and paste a picture. So those are just like quick, easy examples. Again, offering some help before you make an ask. That also, to me, again, goes back to that first question about the pitch battle. It's like that kind of persistence. So just having a presence and being there. You're already like, steps ahead of people that just want to kind of, lurk online, maybe join an online community. So joining a call, joining a webinar, physically showing up at events when they happen. Those are quick ways to do that. And then with that, again, that kind of persistence or tenacity, it's so easy to kind of, get people's contact info when you're at events or kind of find them online. So just, having that follow-up question, like, again, you don't have to solve everything like in a networking event. Those networks build over time. So as you engage in those communities, kind of having a thoughtful question and again, showing your work, right? I talked to 2 or 3 people about this problem. I want to pick your brain about it, right? Again, showing that you've done a little bit of legwork beforehand is a great way to, get, I would say more seasoned people, with larger networks interested. And I think that's, I guess, quick tips on my side.
That's great. So any students or in our audience, I think the main thing that I'm hearing here is how important it is that you do show up and where you're from. stories from your family. I mean, I teach at RIT, and some students, I think self-esteem is something that, some people don't think they have something to offer. So if you're listening now and you don't think you have anything to offer, I would invite you to think of just, things that you've read and ways that you're, maybe a story from where your family is from. And there's always something interesting. And I think interesting people, people want to talk to interesting people, even more so than talking to smart people. People really care about being interesting. So honor your life journey and show up and find ways, no matter what community you're in, to find different times. Some are meetups that happen in the evening, some are early morning, but there's certainly a community that you can plug into in addition to ours, in which we'll be making sure that you're aware of the Start Up Grind Rochester events and other things. I'm really interested in your secret sauce. When you think of your courage, I mean, you've worked with Accenture, which is actually, it's almost like Disneyland for management consulting, right? Meaning that it's a tough, high bar to be in. What allowed you to be so successful? Is there anything that you learned about yourself that you can share with our community?
So having reflected on, I guess, my personal life and journey, and when I was at Accenture, they provide tons of training, professional development programs. All management consultants do. I probably have a slight preference to Accenture because that was my experience. But one of the things I learned over time, and even provided some coaching when I was there, was when people kind of helped me with some of those professional development activities. We used strength finders when I was there for a while. But one of the things I learned about myself was I'm a leader. I lead best when I fill a void. So a lot of the roles when I was in management consulting, where I took on teams and grew and kind of advanced my career, they were usually because was on a project, working with a client at an account, and then when something would shift or move, something would open up. So a lot of those times was there's some thing out there that nobody wants to do, or something that's really challenging, and somebody just left the firm, left the client, and then when people would look for the next round of leader, somebody to kind of fill this maybe awkward or new position, or something really challenging. People that trusted me or people that knew me trusted me, and that's a lot of times where I kind of say I fill the void. So coming back home to Rochester, that's one of the things where I said, how can I, kind of look at my previous successes and strengths, and, again, working for a large consulting firm, doing, project delivery type of work is different than getting involved in the startup community. So that was really with Startup Grind. What I like about that is being able to, it doesn't have a single remit, right? Because it's not a profit generating tool, but be able to figure out kind of whatever is missing from the community, or helping a startup at that point in time. And that's where we can kind of circle resources. So even the idea with that, mentioned we have had a book club. That was an idea that came from one of the founders. He got busy, and just the idea of sending out the first invite and hosting that, that was something we kind of did as a group. But that's where I look at, I guess, with my journey, that goes back to identifying a problem, right? Talking to people about it, right? I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but I was kind of following that startup process. So again, when I look at community building, that's also understanding who the people are, where they're struggling. And again, kudos to Rochester. We have a lot of awesome programs, and Marl coming into town, I don't know how many times over, having a beer or a cocktail with a friend, we're let's start a startup studio in Rochester. I don't know how to do it. And then meet the folks at Marl. I was oh, you guys are doing this. You know what you're doing. How can we just pour gasoline on it, right? And there's a lot of other groups, because even the journey I've been on with getting Startup Grind here created in Rochester, Rock Growth is awesome. Richard Glazer has great programming, very similar format. And had I known him or known him better, I was we partner on events now. But that's one of those things where I'm you learn as you go. And again, kind of part of the great things about Rochester is the concept of more is better. So the idea of we're not in conflict with each other. You could sit down and have a conversation with somebody, and then come out, with each partnering and sponsoring each other. And I kind of go back to if you're talking about networking, these things may look like there's duplicates, or they're, over scheduling each other. It's go attend both, try them all out. Cause you'll click with one, maybe not the other, as far as like different groups and communities that are, sub communities within the upstate New York as a whole.
There's a sentence that Michael said that I really hope that you got. And he said, "I am a leader and I play best to fill a void." I really like the statement, "I am a leader who," and then fill in the blank. I encourage all of you, including myself, to actually take that on as homework to find how can you create a statement where you actually identify where and how you lead the best. How can people reach you and connect with you, Michael?
Oh, I'm hopefully very accessible for folks. On the Startup Grind page, I actually created a welcome kit. And within that, it'll just take you to use an application called Coda. But there's a couple steps. So joining the startup community or the Western New York Startup Community Slack organization, you can message me on there. There's actually a Calendly link where we could schedule to grab a coffee or a drink or a beer, or if you just want to have a Zoom meeting, we can do that as well. Happy to share my email. You can reach out to me at michael.thaney@startupgrind.com anytime. And then again, in that welcome kit, there's a couple of resources to join the coffee club. I try to make it there every Wednesday when I'm in town and don't have a conflict. I may not be the first one in the room, but I try to make it there, so you can always bump into me there. And then also, LinkedIn. I'm probably the only Michael Thaney on the planet, so feel free to message me there as well.
That's great. Michael, thank you so much for being our guest. And I would like to thank Marl Startup Studio founders Amar Khan and Prakash Goswami for bringing this program to Rochester. I would also like to thank all of the teams at Upstate Venture Connect, Upstate Capital, and NextCore. For over a decade, you've been working on creating the tipping point that is now Rochester as a startup innovation hub. I look forward to you subscribing to Think, Build, Launch, and you're welcome to find us on Twitter at MRockStudio and at Jennifer Sertl. I will be sure to include links so that you can connect with us more directly, and I look forward to our next program.